The silence of a fracturing heart is the loudest sound known to existence. A catastrophic vacuum swallowing the sound of her life shattering. Victoria Vance pressed her weight against the cool, frosted glass partition of the ultra-exclusive maternity ward. Her hand, instinctively protective, flew to her 7-month baby bump, a mound of life that now felt like a heavy, unwelcome burden. On the other side of that hazy barrier, the tableau was devastatingly clear. Grant Sterling, the man who had slept beside her for 5 years and shared a decade of promises, was cradling a newborn. His movements were tender, reverent, an intimacy Victoria hadn't felt from him in months. But the child wasn't theirs. And the woman basking in his attention from the pristine white sheets of the hospital bed was Tiffany, his executive assistant, radiating a victorious, self-satisfied smile. In that crystallized, catastrophic instant, Victoria achieved a terrifying stillness. There was no theatrical shriek, no shattering of the glass, no grand confrontation. She simply pivoted, the polished marble floor swallowing the sound of her expensive heels. Grant believed his control was absolute. He was the titular king of his dominion. He was about to discover the profound and lethal truth of the chessboard. The queen moves in every direction, and she is the true weapon. Victoria mechanically straightened the lapel of her custom silk maternity dress, examining the hollow-eyed stranger reflected in the expansive foyer mirror of their sprawling penthouse. The promised maternal glow was a myth. 7 months had brought only a relentless, bone-deep fatigue that had nothing to do with fetal development. It was the silence, the vast, echoing emptiness of their luxury home, that truly drained her. It was 8 p.m. on a Friday, and Grant was, predictably, absent. "He's just building the future for us, Vicky," she murmured, reciting the 6-month-old lie that had become her subconscious life raft. Grant Sterling was the public spectacle, the polished face of Sterling and Vance, the preeminent architectural powerhouse in the city. He possessed the requisite charisma, striking good looks, and boundless, aggressive ambition. 5 years earlier, he was a hungry, broke junior architect with nothing but potential. Victoria, heiress to her late father's formidable estate, had deliberately retreated from public view. She hadn't just invested in Grant. She had orchestrated his entire trajectory. She purchased the struggling firm, executed a strategic rebranding, and installed Grant as the figurehead CEO. To the professional world, he was the genius visionary. To the society pages, Victoria was merely the fortunate, quiet socialite wife. She had cultivated this anonymity, finding refuge from the intrusive glare of the press, content to manage the unseen foundations while he managed the visibility. She had trusted him implicitly with her legacy and their future. The harsh click of the automated lock signaled his arrival, wrenching her from her protective trance. Grant strode in, carelessly dropping his keys into the antique crystal dish. The air immediately changed, thick with the scent of aged scotch and a cloyingly floral perfume. A fragrance entirely too feminine and exotic to be a simple office air freshener. "You're home," Victoria managed, forcing a brittle smile. She navigated her swollen body awkwardly to meet him. "Dinner is cold, but I can easily reheat the roast." Grant offered her nothing, not a glance nor a word of recognition. He yanked at his tie, his face set in a mask of rigid annoyance. "Don't bother. I ate during a client meeting. I'm utterly exhausted, Victoria. Straight to bed." He bypassed her entirely, deftly evading her automatic attempt to brush a kiss against his cheek. "Grant," she called, her voice small and tentative. "Dr. Aries said the baby is positioned perfectly today. I have the ultrasound pictures if you want to see them." "Not tonight, Victoria," Grant snapped, whirling around. His eyes, usually warm and captivating, were now ice-cold, stripped bare of any affection. "I am trying to oversee a multimillion-dollar corporation. I don't have the luxury to coo over blurry black-and-white photos every single day. Do you comprehend the sheer pressure I am operating under?" Victoria physically flinched, as though struck. "I own the company too, Grant," she defended herself, her voice shaking slightly. I know exactly what that pressure entails. Grant emitted a short, corrosive burst of laughter. You? You own a piece of paper, Victoria. I am the one delivering the contracts. I am the face the entire city respects. You just sit here in this house that I pay for, and you nest. He concluded with absolute dismissal, turning to march up the sweeping staircase, leaving her isolated in the cavernous foyer. She laid a protective, shaking hand over her distended belly. He didn't mean it, she whispered to the child inside. Daddy is just stressed. But the sharp, churning sensation in her stomach wasn't pregnancy-related heartburn. It was the undeniable chill of intuition. The following morning, Grant vanished before the first hint of dawn. His performance was meticulous. A detailed explanation of an essential weekend conference in Aspen with critical investors. He packed a small duffel, ensured his passport was visible. A detail meant to imply legitimate international travel, and delivered a sterile kiss to her forehead, a practiced mechanical gesture that sent a tremor of cold dread through her. Don't expect me until late Sunday, he instructed. I might head straight to the office from the airport. Victoria watched the custom black sedan glide silently down the winding drive. A sudden, visceral compulsion overtook her. A need to verify his whereabouts. She prided herself on being the trusting partner, the antithesis of the snooping wife, but the phantom scent of cheap floral perfume from last night was a persistent, stinging reminder. She fired up her laptop and accessed their secure shared cloud financial account. She found no reservations for Aspen. The lie was exposed, but the truth was far worse. Scrolling down revealed a recurring, substantial charge on the corporate American Express. Payment for a private maternity suite at St. Jude's Medical Center. Specifically the ultra-discreet VIP wing. Why, she thought, sinking into the chair, would Grant be paying for a maternity suite? Her phone vibrated violently. A text message from a blocked, unknown number burned onto the screen. He's not in Aspen. He's at St. Jude's, room 404. Come see who he's really building a family with. Her heart convulsed violently against her ribs. It had to be an error, a malicious joke. But the digital record of the credit card charge was indisputable, cold, and relentlessly factual. Victoria grabbed the first coat she saw, a simple beige trench, and dialed an Uber. Visibility was suicide. She needed invisibility. The journey was a blur of calculated silence. The VIP wing of St. Jude's was an oasis of calculated luxury, quieter than any private reading room. The corridors were finished in polished imported marble, and the pervasive hospital scent of disinfectant had been expertly replaced by diffused lavender oil. Victoria kept her head bowed, her vision obscured by massive designer sunglasses that hid the angry redness blooming around her eyes. The trench coat successfully muted the profile of her advanced pregnancy. She located room 404 at the terminus of the hall. The door stood slightly ajar, a horrifying invitation. Victoria froze, a searing pain tightening her chest, her breath catching violently in her throat. She could hear them. She's beautiful, Grant. She has your nose. It was Tiffany's voice, high-pitched and cloyingly possessive. She's perfect, Grant responded. The sound of his voice softer, overflowing with an unguarded tenderness and adoration that Victoria hadn't been the recipient of in years, was the cruelest weapon. My little princess. Victoria edged painstakingly closer to the crack in the mahogany door. The room inside was a festive riot of luxury, crowded with expensive floral arrangements and metallic balloons. Reclining regally in the bed was Tiffany, Grant's meticulously organized personal assistant, the same woman Victoria had politely hosted for dinner and purchased expensive holiday gifts for. Tiffany was positively glowing, sipping sparkling cider. But it was Grant who held her captive attention. He was seated in the armchair beside the bed, meticulously rocking a swaddled infant, his face suffused with an open, blinding paternal pride. When are you finally going to tell her? Tiffany prompted, setting her cider down. You gave me your word, Grant. You said once our baby arrived, you would dump the cow. The coarse, dismissive word, the cow, reverberated in Victoria's skull. She gripped the cold wood of the doorframe until the blood drained entirely from her knuckles. Grant sighed dramatically, eyes still fixed on the baby's face. I have to execute this perfectly, Tiff. Victoria is highly emotional right now, and her name is regrettably still plastered all over the preliminary incorporation deeds. A messy public departure now could halt everything. I need her to willingly sign over the controlling shares of the firm first. The paperwork is ready. I'll tell her it's a necessary tax restructuring before her delivery. And her baby? Tiffany asked, her lip curving into a childish pout. I refuse to have her little brat anywhere near our daughter. Don't fret, Grant scoffed, his tone dripping with contempt. The moment I have those shares secured, I'll file for divorce based on irreconcilable differences. I'll toss her the penthouse to keep her mouth shut. She can raise her kid completely alone. I want a clean slate with you and real heirs. Not a child sired by a woman who simply let herself go the minute she got a wedding ring. Scalding, instantaneous tears tracked down Victoria's face. This transcended mere infidelity. This was a hostile corporate takeover. He wasn't just breaking his marital vows. He was systematically planning to strip her of her entire inheritance, the firm her father had built, the legacy she had foolishly handed to him. He intended to leave her and their unborn child with nothing but a gilded cage. He sat there, reverently holding a baby born of deceit, while her own child kicked vigorously inside her, desperate for recognition. A momentary, blinding wave of destructive rage consumed her. She yearned to kick the door off its hinges, to scream the truth, to hurl the lavish vase of flowers at his smug head in front of every passing nurse. But she focused on Grant's face, on the predatory calculation dancing in his eyes. If she reacted emotionally, she became the predictable stereotype, the hysterical, pregnant wife. He would expertly control the fallout, manipulating the media and the courts, citing her hormonal instability. He would bury her in litigation, leveraging his intimate, current knowledge of the firm's complex finances against her. No, she resolved, wiping the hot moisture with the back of her hand. Anger is instantaneous and cheap. True revenge requires patience, precision, and expense. With unnerving calm, she activated her phone's camera, capturing a crystal-clear photograph through the small gap. Grant, beaming with paternal pride, clutching the infant, and Tiffany, radiant with malice, in the background. She then recorded a 10-second audio clip confirming their conversation regarding the transfer of shares. Her reconnaissance complete, she retreated silently, her expensive heels making no sound on the thick, plush carpet. She turned, walking away from the life she thought she had, towards the battle she knew she must win. Reaching the polished brass elevator, she punched a number into her phone. A number she hadn't needed to call in 5 years. Harrison, she stated, her voice initially trembling but gaining a frightening, metallic edge with each syllable. Victoria. The deep, gravely voice of her father's lifetime lawyer answered immediately. Is everything truly all right? No, she replied, stepping into the empty elevator and decisively pressing the lobby button. Grant is attempting a complete hostile takeover of the firm. He has a mistress, and they have just produced a secret child. I need you to initiate a total financial freeze on all joint assets immediately. She paused as the elevator doors whispered shut. And Harrison, this is crucial. I want to invoke Clause 14 of the original Sterling and Vance Partnership Agreement, the bad faith clause. I need a full team of forensic accountants and private investigators mobilized by the end of the day. I want to know what this man had for breakfast 3 years ago. I want his life dismantled. I want to utterly destroy him. Victoria returned to the sprawling penthouse. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a vast, empty stage set. The production suddenly and violently shut down. The tears had evaporated somewhere between the hospital lobby and the driveway, replaced by an unnervingly cold, metallic resolve. She entered Grant's opulent home office. He had grown fatally complacent. Believing his wife to be a pampered idiot, he hadn't bothered to hide his tracks effectively. She located the documents he intended for her signature inside his monogrammed leather briefcase. She spent a harrowing hour deciphering the pages of dense, deliberately obscure legal jargon. Hidden deep within the purported tax stability paperwork was a transfer of ownership agreement. Her signature would surrender 40% of her controlling shares to him, ostensibly for management stability, thereby granting him decisive majority control. She photographed every page of the document set, then meticulously returned the originals to the briefcase, ensuring the precise angle of the paper clips. The remainder of the weekend was spent methodically packing, not clothes or sentimentality, but essentials. Liquid assets, her most valuable jewelry, private documents, and the hard drives containing the original founding incorporation papers of Sterling and Vance. Everything was relocated to a climate-controlled, secure storage unit across the city. On Sunday evening, Grant breezed in, performing an elaborate show of exhaustion. Aspen was hell, he lied, massaging his temples dramatically. Investors are simply circling sharks, Victoria. You are fortunate to be spared that ordeal. Victoria sat calmly on the sofa, seemingly absorbed in a novel, and did not look up. Did you close the deal? Almost, he said, pulling off his tie. I just need to finalize some internal structuring here. He snapped his fingers. Oh, that reminds me. I have essential papers for you to sign tomorrow. Just standard corporate tax documentation for the upcoming fiscal year. Since the baby is imminent, we must proactively protect our considerable assets. Victoria finally lifted her head, studying his face. His expression was a perfect portrait of sincere concern. The sheer quality of his deception was horrifying. Of course, Grant, she said, her voice perfectly smooth, devoid of any discernible emotion. Whatever is genuinely best for the family. Grant's relief was palpable. He smiled widely. That's my girl. They'll be on the kitchen counter in the morning. Monday arrived. Victoria approached the counter and picked up the solid gold pen. Grant stood rigid, leaning against the marble island in a poor imitation of casualness, holding his breath. The grip on his ceramic mug was so intense his knuckles were bleached white. Victoria slowly lowered the pen tip toward the designated signature line. Then, with deliberate precision, she paused. Oh, I completely forgot, she said, letting the pen drop to the granite surface. What? Grant's voice was instantly razor-sharp with anxiety. What is it now? My hand is so cramped. She fabricated smoothly. Pregnancy-induced carpal tunnel, I think. And frankly, Grant, I made an inviolable promise to my father. Never sign any legal instrument without Harrison conducting a review. It's just old-fashioned superstition, you know. Grant's face instantly went dark with undisguised fury. Harrison is ancient history, Victoria. A dinosaur. He has zero comprehension of modern corporate structuring. He will drag this process out for weeks. We need this finalized today. Why the sudden urgency? Victoria asked, her tone sweet and innocent. Is the IRS holding us at gunpoint? No, but... Grant stammered, abruptly recognizing he was pushing too hard, jeopardizing the whole scam. He forced a sudden, brittle laugh. I simply want this administrative burden completely off our plate before the baby's arrival. Don't you trust me? Victoria met his gaze, her expression unreadable. I trust you exactly as much as you deserve, Grant. The lethal double entendre sailed completely over his greedy head. Fine, Grant snarled, snatching the papers off the counter. I will meticulously explain every clause to you tonight, but this will be signed. We shall see, she replied calmly. Grant left the penthouse in a cloud of frustration, roaring off toward the office complex. The moment the door clicked, Victoria mobilized. Her first stop wasn't the firm. It was the private bank. Supported by Harrison, she accessed all the joint accounts. Crucially, because the original seed capital had originated entirely from her family's trusts, she retained primary signatory authority. She refused to liquidate the accounts, a move that could easily be construed as illegal theft. Instead, she executed a total security freeze, mandating that any outgoing transaction exceeding $500 be flagged as suspicious and require dual biometric authorization to clear. Grant was effectively cut off from immediate cash flow. Next, she proceeded to the headquarters of Sterling and Vance. She hadn't set foot in the main office in 2 years. The main lobby was managed by a new, young receptionist named Chloe, who bore an unsettling resemblance to Tiffany. Chloe barely glanced up. "May I assist you? I am here to see the CFO," Victoria stated. "Do you have an appointment?" Chloe asked dismissively. "I don't require one. I am Victoria Vance." The girl merely blinked, the name clearly carrying zero weight for her. "Mr. Sterling is in a meeting. You can't just—" "I didn't request Mr. Sterling," Victoria interjected, moving swiftly past the desk. "I asked for the CFO, Mr. Henderson." A young security officer moved to block her path, but Jerry, the grizzled head of security who had worked for Victoria's father decades ago, intervened instantly. "Miss Victoria," Jerry greeted her with a warm, genuine smile, stepping between her and the junior guard. "It has been far too long." "Hello, Jerry," she responded, offering him a brief, genuine smile. "I need immediate access to the executive financial server room, and I need you to ensure that absolutely no one notifies Grant of my presence." Jerry immediately tapped his ear. "Consider it done, Miss Vance. My radio suddenly appears to be broken. Haven't seen a soul." Victoria spent 3 grueling hours sequestered with Mr. Henderson, the chief financial officer, a perpetually anxious man Grant had systematically cowed into total compliance. When Victoria calmly produced evidence proving her knowledge of recurring consulting fees being channeled to a newly formed shell company registered specifically in Tiffany's name, Henderson completely collapsed. "He forced me, Mrs. Sterling," the CFO stammered, his body shaking. "He threatened to terminate me instantly." "I am not Mrs. Sterling today, Mr. Henderson," Victoria corrected him, her voice lethal. "I am Ms. Vance, and you have 2 options. You help me expose this fraud, or you will be joining Grant in prison for corporate embezzlement." Under her cold pressure, Henderson swiftly handed over everything. By the time Victoria exited the corporate headquarters, she possessed meticulously copied evidence of every illicit transaction Grant had orchestrated over the past 2 years. He had systematically siphoned over $2 million in company funds to purchase Tiffany a luxury condo, a high-end vehicle, and, most damningly, to cover the extensive bills for the private VIP maternity suite. She now had the ammunition. She only needed to select the optimal battlefield for the war. That evening, she bypassed the penthouse entirely. She checked into the presidential suite at the Four Seasons, registering solely under her maiden name. At precisely 7 p.m., her personal phone began to detonate. The sequence of Grant's texts charted his accelerating panic. "Grant, where are you? Dinner is waiting." "Grant, pick up the phone." "Victoria." "Grant, why are all my corporate credit cards being declined? I am at a critical client dinner and I look like a complete idiot." "Grant." "Victoria." She watched the stream of escalating desperation while serenely sipping chamomile tea in a plush hotel bathrobe. She composed a single, perfectly calibrated reply. "I'm currently at the place where honesty lives. Grant, you should perhaps try to locate it. Don't wait up." Then she powered the phone down. The preliminary phase was complete. The real game was about to commence. Grant Sterling was fundamentally unused to friction. His existence, spanning from his effortlessly charming fraternity days to his meteoric rise in the elite architectural sector, had been a seamless trajectory of yes. Thus, when the card terminal at Le Jardin, the city's most impossibly pretentious French establishment, registered declined for the 3rd consecutive time in front of 2 highly sensitive prospective clients, Grant experienced a primal, icy terror he hadn't felt since his college loan applications. He masked it instantly, of course. "Banking error, gentlemen," he quipped, flashing the award-winning smile while the custom Italian linen shirt beneath his suit soaked through with nervous sweat. He had been forced to suffer the indignity of asking the clients to cover the extravagant bill, weekly promising triple reimbursement. It was professionally catastrophic. It was humiliating. It was amateur. Standing alone in the vast, sterile marble kitchen of the penthouse on Tuesday morning, Grant's fury bordered on madness. "Answer the damn phone, Victoria!" he bellowed into the voicemail for the 20th time, slamming his phone onto the granite island. The house felt unnaturally silent. A vacuum. He had returned late last night to find the master suite undisturbed. The bed was made with military precision. Victoria's expansive dressing room, usually overflowing with cashmere wraps and flowing maternity silks, looked suddenly skeletal. He checked the floor safe. The legacy jewelry, the liquid assets, all gone. "She's throwing a performance," Grant muttered, pacing maniacally, dragging a frustrated hand through his perfectly styled hair. "She's emotional. She's pregnant. This is simply a reaction because I missed her Friday roast. That's the limit of this." He had to believe this. The alternative, that she knew the truth, was an operational impossibility. He had been surgically precise. Tiffany was vetted for discretion. The baby was sealed away behind layers of medical privacy mandates and cash payments. His phone chimed again. It was Tiffany. The realtor just called. The deposit check for the condo bounced. "Grant, they're threatening to put the unit back on the market. Fix this immediately." Grant suppressed a guttural groan, texting back a dismissive lie. "Handling it. Just a system glitch. Don't worry, babe." He immediately dialed the dedicated private banking line for Sterling and Vance. "This is Grant Sterling," he announced, his voice clipped and demanding. "My corporate and personal cards are frozen. Unfreeze them now." "I am terribly sorry, Mr. Sterling," the voice on the other end replied, cool, professional, and entirely robotic. The security freeze was initiated by the primary account holder due to suspected fraudulent activity. "We cannot lift it without her in-person biometric authorization." "I am the CEO of this company," Grant roared into the receiver. "I am her husband. Ms. Vance is the primary account holder, sir. Your authorization level is secondary. Have a pleasant day." Click. The line went dead. Grant stared at the phone, the word secondary ringing in his ears like the deafening report of a firing squad. For 5 years, Victoria had indulged his performance, allowing him the illusion of being the dominant monarch. She had rubber-stamped his ambitious directives, passively endorsed his strategies, and retreated into her self-imposed domestic shadows. He had completely, lethally forgotten that she held the absolute, indisputable leash. He had to regain control. He needed those shares. If he could just get her to sign the transfer document, securing the crucial 40%, he would instantly command the majority. He could fire this bank, fire the CFO, and fire Victoria herself. He had to locate her. He frantically called her closest social contacts. They all claimed ignorance. He called her obstetrician's office. The receptionist informed him, with clinical flatness, that Mrs. Sterling has canceled all remaining appointments with us. The news hit Grant like a physical blow. Canceled? She was 7 months pregnant. Where would she possibly go? A truly horrifying possibility began to coalesce in his mind. He bolted to his home office, powering up his computer. He logged into the corporate server, seeking any distraction. The very first email visible was from the CFO, Henderson. Subject: Urgent. Audit inquiry. Mr. Sterling. The external auditors are demanding immediate receipts regarding the consulting fees paid to T-Bone LLC. They are currently waiting in the main conference room. Please advise immediately. Grant's body seized up. T-Bone LLC, the precisely named shell corporation he used to funnel hundreds of thousands of dollars to Tiffany. External auditors? He hadn't authorized any audit. He snatched his car keys. His bank accounts were useless, but he had a substantial emergency cash reserve secured in his office safe. He needed to reach the firm, obliterate the paper trail, and locate his wife before she did something monumentally foolish. He failed to comprehend that Victoria was not committing a mistake. She was orchestrating a masterpiece. Across town, Victoria was seated deep within the leather confines of Harrison's private library, a sanctuary smelling richly of ancient paper and polished mahogany. "You look exhausted, Victoria," Harrison observed gently, sliding a crystal glass of water across the desk. "But you also look profoundly determined." "I am done being exhausted, Harrison," Victoria confirmed, resting her hand upon her abdomen. The baby offered a reassuringly strong, rhythmic kick against her ribs. Grant believes I am weak. He views me as nothing more than a convenient vessel for his legitimate heirs and a perpetual bank account for his ego. He utterly failed to recall that I was the original architect of his success. I was the one who first taught him how to read the complex blueprints. Harrison offered a thin, grim smile. We have the forensic accounting report. It is damning evidence. He has brazenly misappropriated in excess of $2 million in company funds for purely personal use, the luxury condo, the vehicle, the maternity bills. It is all documented. He hesitated, leaning forward. But Victoria, if we pursue this in court, the public scandal could severely damage the firm's stock price. The public loves Grant. They think he's the corporate genius behind this city's entire skyline. I know, Victoria affirmed. She rose slowly, crossing the plush Persian rug to stand before the tall window. She looked out at the monumental glass and steel city, the very empire her father had painstakingly built. That's precisely why we are not taking this directly to court. Not yet. And what exactly do you have in mind? Harrison asked, sensing the shift from strategy to revenge. Victoria turned back, and in her eyes, a cold, dangerous fire was ignited. Grant scheduled a board meeting for Friday. He plans to use it to railroad his new expansion plan through. His real agenda is to use that meeting to dazzle the legacy board members and force through a fraudulent restructuring proposal designed specifically to dilute my controlling shares and seize control. He's walking into a trap, Harrison realized, the gravity of the situation settling upon him. No, Victoria corrected him, her voice a low, perfect pitch of certainty. He's walking into an execution. I am going to that meeting, Harrison, and I want you to be there. But not as my lawyer. As what? As the executioner. By Thursday, Grant was an absolute wreck. The strain of the impending meeting and the sudden disappearance of his wife had shattered his composure. He hadn't managed a solid hour of sleep in 48 hours. He had been subsisting entirely on stale office coffee and raw, corrosive adrenaline. He had managed a temporary reprieve from the auditors, weakly claiming the crucial files were archived offsite, but he knew the clock was ticking down to zero. Crucially, he still hadn't located Victoria, which was the most terrifying element of all. Then, precisely at 2 p.m., the intercom on his desk buzzed. It was his secretary, the new one, hired when Tiffany had conveniently gone on maternity leave. Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling is holding on line 1. Grant nearly overturned his expensive ergonomic chair in his scramble to snatch the phone receiver. Victoria, where the hell have you been? Hello, Grant. Her voice was utterly calm, almost frighteningly serene. It was the familiar, soothing voice of the woman he had married, not the terrifying, silent ghost who had abruptly fled the penthouse. I'm so sorry to worry you like this. I needed some space. The pregnancy, the rush of hormones. I just felt completely overwhelmed by everything. Grant released a long, shuddering exhale, his shoulders visibly slumping with relief. She was apologizing. She was buying the fabricated narrative he had planted through the tabloids. Thank God. I was worried sick, Vicky. He lied smoothly, the practiced deception instantly restoring his arrogant confidence. I've been going out of my mind with worry. Where exactly are you? I'm at a quiet spa resort in the countryside, she said, painting a picture of tranquility. I needed to clear my head, but I'm coming back tomorrow morning. I know how important the board meeting is for you, dearest. The meeting? Grant repeated, his eyes narrowing slightly, trying to process this unexpected good fortune. Right. You're coming. Of course. I want to support you. And Grant, about those papers you wanted me to sign? Yes. Grant held his breath, every nerve ending taut. I have them with me. I read them over carefully. You're absolutely right. We do need to protect the assets, especially now. I'll sign them and bring them directly to the meeting. We can make it official right there in front of the board. Show a united front. Grant silently pumped his fist beneath the desk. It was perfect. Better than perfect. Signing the transfer papers in the full view of the board would legitimize his complete takeover and make any future challenge impossible. That sounds absolutely wonderful, honey. Grant purred into the phone, his triumph evident. I'll see you there at 10 sharp. I love you. See you, Grant. The line clicked dead. Victoria slowly lowered the phone receiver and looked at her reflection in the full-length hotel mirror. She wasn't at a spa resort 100 miles away. She was 10 blocks away, in a suite overlooking the Sterling and Vance Tower. I love you, too, she whispered to the empty, expensive room. That's precisely why this has to hurt. Friday morning arrived cloaked in a fierce thunderstorm that made the windows of the Sterling and Vance skyscraper rattle in their frames. Grant arrived ridiculously early, impeccably dressed in his finest charcoal pinstripe suit. He felt utterly invincible. He had already texted Tiffany the glorious news. Grant, she's signing today. Once the meeting is over, I'm filing the papers. We'll be celebrating by tonight. Tiffany, good. Bring champagne. The baby has been screaming all night. Grant frowned momentarily at the terse response but quickly dismissed it. Nothing could puncture his mood. He walked into the pristine boardroom. There was Arthur Penhaligon, a 70-year-old real estate mogul who had been her father's fiercely loyal golfing buddy. There was Beatrice Cole, a sharp-eyed, ruthless venture capitalist who famously never cracked a smile. And there were the three younger, more pliable members Grant had maneuvered onto the board recently. His eager yes-men. Grant. Arthur nodded, tapping an antique fountain pen lightly on the pad before him. We hear there's a rather big announcement today. Huge, Arthur. Grant beamed, taking his assigned seat at the head of the table. We are restructuring for the future. Sterling and Vance is about to become a global empire. And Victoria? Beatrice asked, looking over the rim of her severe spectacles. Is she joining us? We haven't seen her in months. She'll be here, Grant assured them, waving a dismissive hand. She's fully on board with the new direction we're taking. At 10:05 a.m., the massive double doors of the boardroom swung open. Grant shot up from his seat, a wide, practiced smile plastered across his face, fully expecting to see Victoria in one of her deliberately casual, apologetic maternity dresses. Instead, the room went profoundly silent. Victoria walked in. She was wearing a perfectly tailored black maternity suit that gave her the powerful silhouette of freshly forged armor. Her hair was pulled back tightly into a severe, elegant bun. She wore small but impossibly bright diamond studs that caught and refracted the light. She did not look tired or overwhelmed. She looked lethal. Behind her walked Harrison, her lawyer, carrying a thick, heavy leather briefcase. And behind him walked Henderson, the long-serving CFO, who looked absolutely terrified, as if he were walking to the gallows. Victoria. Grant faltered, his triumphant smile suddenly wavering and fading. You look stunning. But why is the lawyer here? Victoria didn't spare him a glance. She walked directly to the opposite end of the table, bypassing the main seating area and heading straight for the massive leather armchair reserved for the chairman, her father's seat. Good morning, everyone, she said, her voice clear and projecting with an authority that reached the far corners of the room. She remained standing, radiating command. Please don't get up, Vicky. Honey. Grant chuckled nervously, starting to walk toward her, trying to manage the situation. That's the chairman's seat. You really should sit next to me. Victoria slowly turned her head and looked directly at him. Her eyes were polished like chips of glacial ice. Sit down, Grant. It was not a request. It was an absolute command. Grant froze mid-stride. The board members exchanged quick, nervous glances. Arthur Penhaligon, the old mogul, sat up straighter, his attention fully captured. We have a lot to cover, Victoria stated, placing her hands flat on the polished mahogany. But first, Grant mentioned some papers I needed to sign. Grant scrambled desperately to regain control of the crumbling situation. Yes, right here. He grabbed the folder from his side of the table and slid it across the polished surface toward her. Just the asset protection restructuring like we discussed. Victoria opened the folder. She looked down at the document, transfer of 40% voting rights to Grant Sterling. She picked up the provided pen. Grant's heart hammered a frantic, heavy rhythm against his ribs. Do it. Just do it. Victoria held the pen poised above the signature line. You told the board that this transfer is necessary to stabilize company management. Correct, Grant? Absolutely. Grant nodded forcefully to the room, selling the lie one last time. Victoria wants to focus on the baby. I'm stepping up to handle the burden. The burden, Victoria repeated, the single word dripping with sardonic amusement. She smiled then. A cold, truly terrifying smile that didn't touch her eyes. It's funny you use that word. With a swift, devastating motion, she ripped the document completely in half, then tore the halves again. The loud, brutal sound of the tearing paper was deafening in the suddenly silent room. Grant's jaw dropped completely. Victoria, what are you doing? I'm declining your offer, she stated flatly, tossing the mangled pieces of paper onto the floor. And I am invoking my inherent right as the majority shareholder to call for an immediate vote of no confidence in the CEO. Grant laughed. It was a high, hysterical, disbelief-filled sound. You can't do that. You don't have the grounds, and even if you did, the board supports me. He looked frantically at his three yes-men. Right? They looked away, studying the ceiling or the table grain. Oh, I have grounds, Victoria said softly, stepping back from the table. Harrison. Harrison stepped forward and smoothly placed a thumb drive into the room's sophisticated smart projector system. What is this? Grant demanded, his face flushing a furious, deep red. This is highly irregular. Sit down, Grant. Arthur Penhaligon barked, the 70-year-old's voice suddenly thunderous and authoritative. Grant, stunned, immediately sat down. The projector screen lowered silently. Grounds for dismissal, Victoria narrated, her voice steady and clinical. Embezzlement, corporate fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and moral turpitude. The screen flickered to life. The first image that appeared on the massive 4K screen was not a spreadsheet or a financial graph. It was a photograph. It was the photo Victoria had taken through the crack in the hospital door. High resolution, utterly undeniable. It showed Grant sitting comfortably in the hospital chair, gazing adoringly at the newborn swaddled in his arms. In the background, unmistakable even in a generic hospital gown, was Tiffany, raising a small glass of cider in a silent toast. A sharp gasp rippled through the boardroom. Beatrice Cole covered her mouth with one manicured hand. Isn't that your secretary? Arthur asked, squinting at the screen. That is Tiffany Miller, Victoria confirmed, who is currently on the company payroll as a senior consultant for a shell company called T-Bone LLC. Grant, would you perhaps like to explain to the board why the company has paid T-Bone LLC $250,000 in the last 6 months? Grant was physically shaking. He stood up, knocking his heavy chair backward onto the thick carpet. This is personal. This is a private matter. Victoria is trying to humiliate me because she's jealous. This has nothing to do with the company. It has everything to do with the company. Victoria countered, her voice rising now, filling the vast space. Because you paid for that VIP hospital suite with the corporate AMX, and you paid for her 5th Street condo with the firm's development fund meant for our new branch offices. Harrison clicked a button. The screen instantly changed. Now it displayed damning bank statements. Highlighted starkly in red were transfers labeled St. Jude's Medical VIP Wing, Luxury Motors, and Tiffany Miller Consulting. You stole from us, Beatrice Cole said, her voice heavy with deep disgust. You stole from the partners. I was going to pay it back. Grant screamed, the veins in his neck bulging violently. It was a loan. I made this company. I brought in all the contracts. I am Sterling and Vance. Actually, Victoria said, signaling Harrison again with a slight nod. You're not. The screen immediately changed to a legal document. It was the original incorporation charter of the firm, dated 30 years prior, bearing her father's signature. You see, Victoria addressed the board, deliberately ignoring the raving man standing nearby. When my father died, he left the firm entirely to me. When Grant and I married, I allowed him to run it. I let him put his name on the door, Grant Sterling, right there beside Vance. I let him think he was an equal partner. She turned to look at Grant, who was now sweating profusely, desperately loosening his tie. But Grant never bothered to read the fine print of the prenuptial agreement, nor the company charter. He simply assumed that because we were married, he owned half of everything I owned. He assumed that Sterling and Vance was a 50-50 partnership. She took a deliberate step closer to him, closing the distance. But the firm is legally structured as a limited liability partnership with a strict tiered share system. Class A shares hold all the voting power. Class B shares are purely for dividends and profit sharing. Grant holds 49% of the non-voting Class B shares. She paused, letting the implication land. I, however, own 100% of the Class A shares. I own 90% of the total equity of this firm. Grant Sterling doesn't own a single brick of this building. He is merely an employee, an at-will employee. The silence in the room was absolute and devastating. Grant looked as if he had been physically struck in the gut. He staggered backward until his spine hit the cool wall. You lied to me, he whispered, his voice broken. You let me build this up, thinking it was all mine. I let you build it up because I loved you, Victoria said, her voice finally cracking, betraying the immense weight of the betrayal. I wanted us to build it together. I didn't care about the shares. I didn't care about the titles. I trusted you with everything. She gestured toward the screen where the damning picture of him holding the other baby still loomed large. But then you decided to build a different, secret life with my money. She turned back crisply to the board. I move for the immediate termination of Grant Sterling as CEO, effective immediately. I also move for the commencement of criminal proceedings for embezzlement and fraud. All in favor? Arthur Penhaligon's hand shot up instantly. I beat Rick Cole. Even the three yes-men, finally seeing the ship sink and their captain burning slowly, tentatively raised their hands. The motion carries, Victoria pronounced. She looked toward Jerry, the head of security, who was waiting by the door with two uniformed guards. Jerry, Victoria commanded, please escort Mr. Sterling out of the building. He is to take nothing, no laptop, no phone, no files. Check his pockets thoroughly. Jerry stepped forward, his face grim but satisfied. He had never liked Grant. Yes, Miss Vance, with pleasure. Grant looked around the room. He saw no sympathy, no understanding. He saw only cold, hard judgment. His empire had crumbled completely in less than 10 minutes. You can't do this to me. Grant snarled, his eyes wide and desperate. I am the father of your child. Victoria placed a protective hand on her own swollen belly. She looked at him with a pity that cut deeper than any anger. No, Grant, you made your choice. You're the father of Tiffany's child. My child? My child has a mother who owns a kingdom, and that's more than enough. Jerry grabbed Grant's arm firmly. Let's go, sir. Don't make a scene. Get your hands off me, Grant shouted, shaking him off. He straightened his jacket, attempting to salvage a pathetic shred of dignity. He glared at Victoria one last time. You think you've won? The company is nothing without me. The clients love me. I'll start my own firm. I'll crush you and I'll take half your money in the divorce. Victoria watched him stride toward the door. Grant, she called out, her voice soft but carrying. He stopped, his hand resting on the polished brass door handle, looking back with a venomous sneer. You really should have read the prenup, she said, her voice now a gentle, lethal whisper. The infidelity clause voids all spousal support. You're leaving this marriage exactly how you entered it. Broke. Grant's face went a ghastly, immediate white. He opened his mouth, trying to unleash a primal scream, but no sound emerged. He turned and fled the room, Jerry and the guards close on his heels. As the door closed, Victoria let out a long, shaky breath, the residual tension leaving her body. She finally sank into the leather of the chairman's chair. Her legs were visibly trembling from the adrenaline crash. Arthur Penhaligon stood up and walked around the table to her. He placed a gentle, fatherly hand on her shoulder. Your father would have been immensely proud, Victoria, he said quietly. He always told me you were the tough one. Victoria looked up at the old man and managed a genuine smile, allowing the tears she had held back to finally fall. "I'm not tough, Arthur," she confessed. "I'm just a mother protecting her young." But the drama was far from over. Grant Sterling was certainly not a man who went down quietly, and Tiffany Miller was absolutely not a woman who surrendered her meal ticket without a brutal fight. As Victoria left the Sterling building an hour later, utterly exhausted but decisively victorious, her phone rang. It wasn't Grant. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Sterling," a voice said, professional and rushed. "This is the emergency room at St. Jude's Medical Center. Your husband or ex-husband has just been admitted." Victoria's heart lurched sickeningly. What happened? "He crashed his car," the nurse stated. "He was driving at extremely high speed. He kept screaming that he had to fix it." "But, Mrs. Sterling, there was a passenger." Victoria gripped the phone, her knuckles white. "Who?" "A woman. Tiffany Miller. And there was a child safety seat in the back." The drive to St. Jude's Medical Center was a blinding blur of flashing red taillights and torrential rain. Victoria sat in the back of her town car, her hands resting protectively on her stomach, feeling a strange, cold detachment. A numbness that shielded her from the full horror of the news. Grant, Tiffany, the baby, the trio that had destroyed her marriage was now a pile of wreckage on the side of the interstate. When she arrived at the emergency room, the scene was predictable chaos. Police officers were quietly interviewing nurses. A gurney was being rushed down the hall. "Mrs. Sterling," a doctor approached her. He looked overworked and utterly exhausted. "I'm Dr. Evans. Thank you for coming so quickly. Is he alive?" Victoria asked, her voice flat, devoid of the panic a loving wife should feel. "He is," Dr. Evans confirmed. "He's in surgery now. Multiple severe fractures, internal bleeding, and a severe concussion. We're doing everything we can. But, Mrs. Sterling, the police need to speak with you about the vehicle." Victoria nodded, turning to see two officers approaching. Behind them, sitting on a waiting room chair with a quickly bandaged head and a look of pure, raw hysteria, was Tiffany. Tiffany looked up and saw Victoria. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The mistress's face twisted instantly from fear into venomous, unrestrained rage. "You!" Tiffany shrieked, struggling to stand up despite her injury. "You did this. You killed him." The entire lobby went silent, all eyes turning toward the scene. Victoria didn't flinch. She simply adjusted the collar of her trench coat and walked toward Tiffany, stopping 5 feet away. "Sit down, Tiffany," Victoria said calmly, the coolness of her tone unnerving. "You are making a public scene." He was distraught. Tiffany screamed, tears carving channels through her cheap mascara. "He called me right after the meeting. He said, 'You ruined him.' He said you took everything he had. He was driving like a madman because he was trying to get us away from you. If he dies, it's entirely on your hands." Victoria looked steadily at the younger woman. She saw the calculating fear hidden just beneath the surface of the anger. Tiffany wasn't mourning Grant, the man. She was mourning the corporate ATM that had just been violently smashed. "He was driving like a madman," Victoria corrected her, emphasizing the driver's agency. "Because he is a malignant narcissist who couldn't handle the very predictable consequences of his own selfish actions. And you, Tiffany, were in that car because you knew the money tap had been abruptly turned off." "I love him," Tiffany spat the words out. "Do you?" Victoria asked, her voice skeptical. "Or do you love the condo on 5th Street, the one that's currently in foreclosure proceedings? Do you love the Audi SUV you crashed? The one that was reported stolen an hour ago because the company lease was immediately terminated after the board meeting?" Tiffany's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. She had absolutely no clever comeback left. "Where is the baby?" Victoria asked, her tone softening marginally for the first time. "She's in observation," Tiffany mumbled, finally looking away, ashamed. The car seat saved her. Not a scratch. Victoria let out a quiet breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Thank God for that. She's the only innocent person in this entire mess. A police officer stepped between them, attempting to de-escalate the tension. "Mrs. Sterling, We need a formal statement regarding the vehicle's status. It's not Mrs. Sterling anymore, Victoria said, turning her back decisively on Tiffany. It's Ms. Vance. And yes, officer, let's talk about the stolen vehicle. 3 days passed. Grant survived the emergency surgery, but his leg was shattered and his lucrative career was effectively, brutally over. The news of his massive embezzlement had already leaked to the press, likely thanks to Arthur Penhaligon's discreet contacts, and Sterling and Vance stocks actually rose after Victoria's decisive, strong action in the boardroom. The market adored a strong, stable leader. Victoria didn't visit Grant until he was moved out of the intensive care unit. She needed time, and she needed to close this book completely. She walked into his private room. He looked pathetic and small in the expansive hospital bed, hooked up to a confusing tangle of monitors, his legs suspended in an orthopedic sling. His face was a patchwork of bruised purple and sickly yellow. When he saw her, his eyes immediately filled with manufactured tears. "Vicky," he croaked, weakly attempting a smile. "You came." Victoria stood rigidly at the foot of the bed. She made no move to sit down. "I brought the papers, Grant," she said, pulling a thin file from her handbag. "Not the transfer papers, darling. The divorce papers." Grant winced, closing his eyes briefly. "Can't we talk about this? I almost died, Victoria. Doesn't that mean anything?" It gave me perspective. I realized I made a terrible mistake. "I love you. We can fix this. I can earn your trust back." Victoria stared at him, marveling at the boundless scope of his delusion. He genuinely believed he could charm his way out of corporate fraud and ruin. He thought a few bruises and a sob story would somehow erase the years of embezzlement, the affair, and the secret family. "Grant," she said, her voice weighted with exhaustion, "you are currently facing 10 to 15 years in state prison for corporate fraud and grand embezzlement. Harrison has already handed over the complete files to the district attorney's office." Grant's face went utterly pale. "You wouldn't let the mother of your child see her father in prison." "I won't," Victoria agreed readily, "because you aren't going to be her father. I'm petitioning for full custody of my child, Grant, with no visitation rights, and given your now public criminal record and declared financial instability, the judge will absolutely grant it." "I have a daughter," Grant shouted, vaguely gesturing toward the hallway. "Tiffany's baby. I have a family." "Ah, yes," Victoria said, pulling another single piece of paper from her file. "About that." She walked calmly to the side of the bed and placed the document directly onto his chest. "What is this?" Grant asked, struggling weakly to lift his head and focus. While the baby was in observation after the crash, Victoria explained, her voice softening into chilling silk. "The doctors had to run blood tests to check for internal trauma. They needed parental blood types for potential transfusions. Tiffany is type O. You are type A." Grant looked utterly confused. So the baby is type B, Grant." The room went completely dead silent. The only sound was the frantic, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, which was speeding up rapidly under his hospital gown. That's impossible," Grant whispered, shaking his head slightly. "That's a mistake. We ran a DNA test immediately just to be certain," Victoria said, her delivery utterly ruthless. "It is not a mistake. You aren't the father, Grant. Tiffany was sleeping with her personal trainer the entire time. She pinned the baby on you because she knew you were simply a rich mark." Grant stared up blankly at the acoustic ceiling tiles. His mouth hung open, slack and speechless. The full weight of the realization crashed over him, heavier and more devastating than the impact of the car accident. He had thrown away the love of a brilliant, loyal woman. He had embezzled millions of dollars. He had destroyed his carefully constructed reputation. He had lost his company. He was facing a decade in prison. And he had done it all for a woman who never loved him and a child that was never even his. "No," he wheezed, the sound tearing raggedly from his chest, tears streaming unchecked down his face. "No, this can't be happening. Not all of it." "Tiffany has already been discharged," Victoria confirmed, her voice utterly devoid of sympathy, delivering the final, calculated thrust of the blade. She skipped town this morning. She knows the money is gone. You'll never see her again, Grant. Grant started to weep, the noise a broken, ugly, guttural sound that echoed his profound failure. He reached out a trembling hand toward Victoria, a desperate, pathetic plea for salvation. Vicky, please help me. I have nothing left. I have no one. Victoria merely looked at his hand, the hand that now trembled uselessly. She remembered the warmth of that hand gripping hers in moments of manufactured intimacy. She remembered how that same hand had later signed the exorbitant checks funding his deceitful parallel life. Most damningly, she remembered watching from the darkened hallway as that hand gently cradled a baby that was not hers, its touch tender and proprietary. She didn't take it. You have exactly what you built, Grant, she stated, her tone flat and final. Nothing. She turned her back and started walking toward the door, leaving him isolated in the stark white room. Victoria! He screamed, the sudden, desperate shriek bouncing violently off the sterile walls. Don't leave me here. I'm your husband. I need you. She stopped at the threshold, her fingers resting on the cold metal of the handle. She didn't fully turn, instead glancing back over her shoulder, her sophisticated silhouette perfectly framed by the oppressive glare of the hallway light. You were my investment, she stated icily, the words precise and chilling. And I'm cutting my losses. She pulled the door open and stepped through. The heavy, unforgiving click as the lock engaged sounded like the closing of a tomb, sealing him completely in his sudden, suffocating silence. The Queen's Gambit. 6 months later, the corporate offices of Sterling and Vance, now streamlined and powerfully rebranded simply as the Vance Group, were a hub of polished efficiency and kinetic energy. The quarterly earnings report dominated the massive projection screen. Profits were up an unprecedented 200%. Victoria presided at the head of the immense mahogany conference table. In a bespoke bassinet positioned beside her sat her 2-month-old son, William. He was cooing softly, completely engrossed in batting at a plush toy, an anomaly of domesticity in this empire of ambition. Excellent work on finalizing the Tokyo contract, Betrayal, Victoria said, offering a rare, genuine smile to the board member. With this synergy secured, I think we are primed and ready to execute our full expansion into the European market. Agreed, Beatrice replied, returning the smile and then pausing to offer a small wave to the infant. William seems to approve of the strategy, too. The meeting adjourned. The executives, a mix of seasoned veterans and hungry young talent, filed out efficiently, each pausing momentarily to offer a respectful nod or wave toward the CEO's son. They respected Victoria Vance not because she carried a title, or because she was a woman succeeding in a man's world, or even because she was now a single mother. They respected her because she was a calculating, ruthlessly effective shark who had not only defended their company from outside attack but had surgically cleansed it from deep within. Harrison lingered behind, waiting until the door was shut. I received an official correspondence from the prison today, he said quietly, his voice neutral. Victoria didn't look up from meticulously stacking her legal papers. And Grant is not doing well, Harrison continued. He's been assigned to the industrial laundry detail. He still tries to send letters, but I have returned them all unopened, as per your strict instruction. Victoria paused, the movement of her hands slowing slightly. She glanced down at little William, who was now sleeping, noticing how he possessed Grant's distinctive eye shape, but unquestionably carried her fierce, unbreakable spirit. Good, she stated, her voice sharp and uncompromising. Keep it exactly that way. He asked quite gently for a recent photo of the boy. Harrison added, a hint of hesitant sympathy in his tone. Victoria picked up William, holding him tightly against her chest, inhaling the soothing, hopeful scent of baby powder and clean linen. He chose his family, Harrison, she said, walking toward the floor-to-ceiling panoramic window. He chose a lie. He does not get to enjoy the truth I built. That right is exclusively mine. Down below, the city spread out, a dizzying, vibrant tapestry of ambition and motion. It was alive. Somewhere out there, the parasitic Tiffany was likely already circling her next unsuspecting victim. Somewhere else, sealed inside a concrete cell, Grant was scrubbing stained sheets, doomed to be eternally haunted by the precise memory of the grand, enviable life he had cavalierly thrown away. But up here, soaring above the noise and the wreckage, Victoria Vance was exactly where destiny had intended her to be. She was the owner. She was the mother. She was the undeniable survivor. She looked at her reflection in the polished glass of the skyscraper. The look of tired exhaustion that had defined her for years was gone. She looked like a queen who had calmly surveyed her collapsing, infested castle, deliberately burned it to the ground to eradicate the rats, and then used the resulting ashes as the foundation to build an impervious palace. "Ready to go home, Will?" she whispered softly to her son. She turned off the boardroom lights, casting the memories of the past into the shadow-drenched dark, and then walked resolutely into the boundless light of her future. What a devastating, cathartic roller coaster of emotions. Victoria's story is a powerful, unforgettable reminder that silence is rarely a sign of weakness. Sometimes, it is the terrifying, calculated calm preceding a catastrophic tsunami. Grant mistook his wife's deliberate kindness for genuine blindness, and his staggering arrogance cost him absolutely everything. His freedom, his reputation, his legacy, and his family. It is the perfect, chilling portrait of karma delivered with surgical precision. The metaphorical grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence. Often, it's just cheaply laid artificial turf painted over an active sinkhole. Victoria Vance proved that the most genuinely dangerous person in any room is the one who possesses every crucial piece of information but says absolutely nothing until the timing is flawlessly perfect. She didn't merely win the game. She irrevocably redefined the rules. If you were riveted by this compelling story of betrayal, strategic revenge, and ultimately satisfying justice, please take a second to hit that like button. It provides invaluable support to help this channel continue to grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who appreciates high-stakes drama and subscribe, making sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss another story. What strategic moves would you have deployed if you were standing in Victoria's cold, expensive shoes? Let me know your thoughts and insights in the comments section below. Thanks for watching.